The morning mist was still lifting off Mirror Lake when I heard the first knock. It came sharp and insistent, disrupting the silence I'd spent 3 years cultivating. Through the window, I could see a silver SUV in my driveway, one I didn't recognize. The license plate frame read, "Beach or Lake, life is good." I set down my coffee and walked to the door. My nephew Marcus stood on the porch, grinning like he'd just won something. Behind him, his wife Jennifer was already taking photos of the lake view with her phone. Two kids I'd met maybe twice in their lives were running toward the dock. "Uncle Thomas!" Marcus pulled me into a hug before I could react. "Surprise visit." Jen and I were talking, and we realized you've got this amazing place just sitting here mostly empty. 3 bedrooms, right on the water. It's perfect. I stepped back. Perfect for what? For summer, obviously. He said it like I was slow to catch on. The kids are out of school in 2 weeks. We figured June through August, give or take. You're here alone anyway, and families should share, right? I'd bought this lake house in northern Wisconsin after Linda died. 42 years of marriage. And then one morning, she simply didn't wake up. The doctors called it a cardiac event. I called it the end of everything I'd known. I was 61 years old, and suddenly every room in our suburban Chicago house echoed with absence. The lake house had been Linda's dream. We'd talked about it for years, a place to retire, to watch sunsets, to finally have the peace we'd deferred while raising our daughter and building my accounting practice. I sold the Chicago house, sold the practice, and used everything to buy this 1,200 square foot cabin on 3 acres. It wasn't fancy. The dock needed repair. The roof would need replacing in a few years. But it was mine, and it was quiet. "Marcus," I said carefully, "I appreciate you thinking of me, but this isn't a vacation rental. I live here." "Exactly. You live here alone in 3 bedrooms. We're family." He walked past me into the house like the conversation was over. Jennifer followed, already commenting on the furniture. "We might need to move some stuff around. The kids will want the room with the bunk beds." "Wait." I followed them inside. "You can't just... Uncle Thomas, let's be real." Marcus turned, his smile fading into something harder. "You rattle around in this place by yourself. It's not healthy. Mom worries about you. We all do. This way, you'll have company. The kids can have a real summer experience. And honestly, you'll save us about $8,000 we would have spent on vacation rentals. It's a win for everyone." Marcus was my older sister, Patricia's son. Patricia had been dead for 5 years, cancer, and I'd helped with her medical bills when Marcus claimed he couldn't contribute. I'd paid for part of his wedding. I'd given him financial advice he'd never followed. And now he stood in my living room, reorganizing my life like it was his right. "I'm saying no," I said. He laughed. "Come on, don't be like that." "I'm not being like anything. The answer is no." Jennifer stopped photographing the kitchen. "Is this because we didn't give you advance notice? We can come back next week if that helps. But honestly, the kids are so excited. Marcus has been telling them about the fishing, and the answer is still no." The smile finally left Marcus's face. "You know what? Fine. We'll go. But I'm telling you right now, Uncle Thomas, this attitude is exactly why people worry about you. You're isolated up here. You're not thinking clearly. Maybe you need someone to check in on you more regularly. Make sure you're competent to make your own decisions." He let the word hang in the air. Competent. They left, the SUV kicking up gravel as it pulled away. I stood on the porch long after they'd gone, watching the morning light spread across the water. The loons were calling to each other near the far shore. Everything looked the same as it had an hour before, but something had shifted. I'd been an accountant for 37 years. I understood patterns. I understood when someone was laying groundwork for something bigger. Marcus's final comment wasn't casual. It was a threat. That afternoon, I called Robert Chen, an attorney I'd known professionally for years. We'd both been in the same Rotary Club back in Chicago. He'd retired to Madison and kept a small practice handling estate planning. "Thomas, good to hear from you. How's the lake life?" "Complicated," I said, and explained the situation. Robert was quiet for a moment. Did he actually use the word competent? Yes. then you need to take this seriously. I've seen this pattern before. He's setting up a narrative. Isolated elderly man, living alone, making poor decisions. If he can establish that, he can petition for guardianship or conservatorship. Once he does that, he controls everything: your property, your finances, your medical decisions. Based on one refused request, based on whatever story he can build. And Thomas, you're in a vulnerable demographic, widowed, living alone in your 60s. If he brings in a sympathetic social worker or gets a doctor to express concerns, a judge might listen. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. What do? Document everything. Get a comprehensive medical evaluation showing you're mentally and physically sound. Consider setting up a trust with an independent trustee. Make sure your estate planning is airtight. And Thomas, start recording every interaction with him. Wisconsin is a one-party consent state. If he shows up again, you can legally record without telling him. I thanked him and hung up. Through the window, the lake looked the same as always. Peaceful, eternal, indifferent to human concerns. But I knew Marcus was coming back. I was right. 4 days later, his SUV returned. This time, Jennifer's parents were with them, and the back was full of suitcases. I met them in the driveway. My phone was in my shirt pocket, recording. "Uncle Thomas!" Marcus's smile was back. "We talked it over as a family, and we decided we're not going to let you push us away. You need people around, so we're moving in for the summer, just until Labor Day. It'll be good for everyone. Marcus, I told you no, and I'm telling you this isn't negotiable." He moved toward the back of the SUV. "We're family. You don't get to shut out family." Jennifer's father, a heavy-set man named Dale, stepped forward. "Listen, friend, you've got a house going to waste. You've got family who wants to spend time with you. What's the problem? My Jenny says you're living like a hermit up here. That's not natural for a man your age. My lifestyle isn't your concern." "Well, it is when you've got a resource like this that could benefit the whole family." Dale gestured at the house. 3 bedrooms sitting empty while my grandkids are crammed in a tiny apartment in Milwaukee. Doesn't make sense. It makes perfect sense. It's my house. Marcus pulled a suitcase out of the SUV. "We're staying, Uncle Thomas. You can either be gracious about it or you can be difficult. But we're staying." I felt anger rising, but I kept my voice level. "If you enter my house without permission, it's trespassing. I will call the sheriff." "The sheriff?" Marcus laughed. "I'm your nephew. We're family. What are you going to tell him, that your own family is trying to visit you? Do you know how that sounds? Do you know what that makes you look like?" He was right about one thing: it would sound strange. But I'd learned from Robert that sounding strange wasn't the same as being wrong. "I'm asking you to leave my property." Jennifer started crying. The kids were watching from the SUV, confused. Dale put his hand on my shoulder, and I stepped back. "Don't touch me." "Whoa, easy there." Dale raised his hands. "No one's trying to hurt you. We're trying to help. Jenny, maybe we should call someone. A professional. He seems agitated." I pulled out my phone. "I'm calling the sheriff now." Marcus's expression changed. The smile disappeared entirely. "You know what, Uncle Thomas? Call them. Let them see how you're acting. Let them see how paranoid and hostile you're being to your own family. I think it'll be very educational." I made the call. The sheriff's department said they'd send someone out. Marcus and his family waited in the driveway, not leaving, but not approaching the house either. Jennifer kept crying. The kids were playing on their tablets in the car. Dale stood with his arms crossed, shaking his head like I was the unreasonable one. The deputy who arrived was young, probably mid-20s. Her nameplate said Ramirez. I explained the situation while Marcus interrupted with his own version concerned nephew, isolated uncle, refusal to accept help or family support. Deputy Ramirez listened to both sides. "Mr. Hartley, is this your property?" "Yes." "And do you want these people here?" "No." She turned to Marcus. "Then you need to leave. This is insane." "He's not thinking clearly?" "Sir, it's his property. If he's asking you to leave, you need to leave. What about his welfare? What about making sure he's okay? If you have concerns about his welfare, You can contact Adult Protective Services, but you can't force your way into someone's home, even if you're related. They left, but slowly, making a show of their reluctance. Marcus made sure Deputy Ramirez heard him say, "We'll be in touch with the proper authorities. This isn't over." After they'd gone, Ramirez stayed for a few minutes. "Mr. Hartley, off the record? Get yourself a lawyer. I've seen this before. When family starts talking about welfare and competency, they're usually after something. I have a lawyer. Thank you, Deputy." She nodded and left. I stood in the driveway as the sun set over the lake, turning the water to gold and copper. The loons were calling again. Everything looked peaceful, but I knew it wasn't. 2 weeks later, I got a call from a woman who identified herself as Grace Murphy from Adult Protective Services. Someone had filed a complaint expressing concern about an elderly man living alone in rural conditions, possibly neglecting his health and safety. "I'm 64, I said, "not elderly. Nevertheless, we have to follow up on all reports. I'd like to schedule a home visit." "Who filed the report?" "I can't disclose that information." "Was it my nephew Marcus?" "I can't disclose that information, Mr. Hartley." I agreed to the visit for the following Tuesday. Then I called Robert Chen again. "They're accelerating," he said. "Get your medical records in order. Schedule a full physical and cognitive assessment before she comes. Clean your house. Have your bills organized. Show that you're managing everything competently. And Thomas? Be polite, but don't volunteer information. Answer her questions, but don't give her ammunition." I spent the weekend preparing. I went to my doctor in town, Dr. Elizabeth Warner, and explained the situation. She conducted a full examination, including a cognitive screening test. My blood pressure was slightly elevated, stress, probably, but otherwise I was healthy. She wrote a letter documenting this. I cleaned the house thoroughly, organized 3 months of paid bills, and prepared a list of my regular activities: weekly shopping trips to town, volunteer work at the library, monthly book club meetings, daily walks. I was living, not deteriorating. Grace Murphy arrived on Tuesday morning in a county vehicle. She was perhaps 50, with gray-streaked hair and a professional demeanor that gave nothing away. I invited her in and offered coffee, which she accepted. She walked through the house, making notes. "How long have you lived here?" 3 years. "Alone?" "Yes. My wife passed away before I moved here." "Do you have regular contact with family?" "My daughter calls twice a week. She lives in Seattle. My nephew used to visit occasionally, but we've had a disagreement recently." "What kind of disagreement?" "He wanted to use my house as a vacation rental for the summer. I declined. He didn't take it well." She made more notes. "Are you able to manage your daily activities? Shopping, cooking, hygiene?" "Yes. I have a list of my regular routines if you'd like to see it." I showed her the documentation I'd prepared. She reviewed it carefully, asked about my medications. I took one for blood pressure, prescribed years ago, and inquired about my financial management. I showed her my organized bills and bank statements. "Mr. Hartley, the report we received suggested you were isolated, potentially neglecting yourself, and showing signs of cognitive decline or paranoia. Based on what I'm seeing, none of that appears accurate. Your home is clean and well-maintained. You're clearly managing your affairs. Do you know why someone might report otherwise? My nephew wants to use this house. When I said no, he suggested I wasn't competent to make my own decisions. I believe he filed this report to establish a paper trail." She closed her notebook. "For what it's worth, I'll be reporting that there are no concerns about your welfare or capacity. However, if he's serious about pursuing guardianship or conservatorship, this won't stop him. He can still petition the court. You should consult an attorney." "I have." "Good." She stood to leave, then paused. "Mr. Hartley, I see a lot of family situations in this job. Most people who file reports genuinely care about their relatives, but some people see vulnerability as opportunity. Be careful." After she left, I stood on the dock and watched the water. A family of mergansers paddled past, the mother leading a line of chicks. Nature had hierarchies and territories and boundaries. Animals understood these things instinctively. Humans had to learn them. Marcus called that evening, I let it go to voicemail. Uncle Thomas, I heard APS visited today. I hope you understand this comes from a place of concern. Jen and I have been talking, and we think maybe a compromise would work. We'll only stay July and August. That's it. 2 months. The kids really want to experience the lake, and honestly, Uncle Thomas, you owe me. I know you don't want to hear it, but after everything I did for Mom, after everything our family has been through, you owe me this. I deleted the message and blocked his number. 3 days later, Robert Chen called. Marcus has filed a petition for temporary guardianship. He's claiming you're isolated, paranoid, and making irrational decisions that endanger your welfare. He's got statements from his wife, her parents, and apparently a neighbor who says they rarely see you. I don't socialize with the neighbors much. I like privacy. I know. But Thomas, we need to take this seriously. We're going to file a motion to dismiss, and I'm going to need you to appear in court with medical and financial documentation. The good news is that APS report helps us. The bad news is that judges sometimes err on the side of caution with older adults. I'm 64. To some people, that's old enough. The hearing was scheduled for 4 weeks out. In the meantime, I continued my routine. I went to town 3 times a week. I had coffee with Harold Fisher, a retired teacher who lived 2 houses down. I made sure people saw me being normal, functional, independent, and I started preparing my surprise. Robert had warned me that even if we won this round, Marcus might try again. He might wait a few months, file new reports, build a new case. This would become my life: constant defense, constant documentation, constant proof that I deserved to control my own existence, unless I made it impossible for him to continue. I spent a week reviewing my finances with a fiduciary advisor Robert recommended. Together, we established an irrevocable trust. The lake house, my savings, my investment accounts, everything went into the trust. I named my daughter Carolyn as trustee, with Robert as backup. The terms were clear. I had full use of all assets during my lifetime, but no one could claim them through guardianship or challenge my capacity. The trust was protected. I also drafted a new will, explicitly stating that Marcus would receive nothing from my estate, with a detailed explanation of why. I wanted no ambiguity. No chance for him to claim I'd forgotten him or been confused. Then, I did something else. I contacted Tom Bradshaw, a journalist who wrote for the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. He'd done a series on elder financial abuse the previous year. I explained my situation, everything from the initial demand to the guardianship petition. "Would you be willing to let me write about this?" he asked. "Not now, but after the hearing? These stories need to be told." "Yes," I said. "If people understood how easily this can happen, maybe they'd protect themselves." The court hearing took place on a humid Thursday in July. The courtroom was small, wood-paneled, with tall windows that let in too much sun. Marcus sat with his lawyer, a sharp-dressed woman who specialized in elder law. I sat with Robert. The judge was a man in his late 50s named Harrison. He reviewed the petition, then looked at me. "Mr. Hartley, your nephew is requesting temporary guardianship, claiming you're unable to manage your affairs. How do you respond?" I stood. "Your Honor, I'm fully capable of managing my affairs. I've brought documentation, medical records, financial statements, character references showing that I'm healthy, solvent, and independent. This petition isn't about my welfare. It's about access to my property." Marcus's lawyer objected. "Your Honor, Mr. Hartley has isolated himself in a rural area, rejected family support, and exhibited paranoid behavior toward relatives who only want to help. We have statements attesting to his hostile and irrational responses to reasonable requests." Robert stood. "Your Honor, may I point out that rejecting family support means declining to let relatives use his vacation home for free. Hostile and irrational responses means saying no when they showed up uninvited with luggage. And paranoid behavior apparently means protecting his property rights. We have recordings of these interactions, with Mr. Hartley clearly and calmly setting boundaries that were repeatedly violated." Judge Harrison reviewed the medical report from Dr. Warner, the APS report from Grace Murphy, and the statements from both sides. "Mr. Hartley, I'm going to ask you some questions." He spent 10 minutes asking about my daily routine, my financial management, my health, my social connections. I answered each question clearly and precisely. When he asked about my relationship with Marcus, I was honest. Your Honor, Marcus is my nephew, and I care about him. But he doesn't have the right to dictate how I use my property. When I refused his request to stay at my house for the summer, he became hostile and threatened my competency. This petition is retaliation, not concern. Judge Harrison turned to Marcus. Why can't you rent a vacation property if you want your children to have a lake experience? Marcus hesitated. We could, Your Honor, but families should help each other. My uncle has resources he's not using, and he has the right to use them as he sees fit. Mr. Hartley clearly demonstrates capacity. This petition is denied. Marcus's face went red. Your Honor, with respect, the petition is denied. Judge Harrison's voice was firm. Mr. Hartley has convincingly demonstrated that he's managing his affairs competently. The evidence suggests this petition was filed not out of genuine concern, but because of a family dispute over property access. This court will not be used as a weapon in such disputes. We walked out of the courthouse into the bright afternoon. Marcus tried to approach me in the parking lot, but Robert stepped between us. Mr. Hartley's property is protected by trust now. Any further harassment will result in a restraining order. Marcus stared at me. You're going to die alone in that house, Uncle Thomas. No one around, no family, and you'll deserve it. I'd rather die alone than live surrounded by people who see me as a resource to exploit. He left. Jennifer and her parents followed, their SUV peeling out of the parking lot like teenagers. Robert drove me back to the lake. We sat on the dock as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. He might try again, Robert said. I don't think so. The trust makes it pointless. And if Tom Bradshaw writes that article, Marcus will be too embarrassed to continue. You're probably right. Robert stood to leave. For what it's worth, Thomas, you handled this better than most people would. A lot of people would have given in just to avoid the fight. Linda used to say I was stubborn. She was right. After Robert left, I stayed on the dock until the stars came out. The lake was perfectly still, reflecting the sky like a mirror. Somewhere in the distance, a loon called, and another answered. My phone rang. I almost didn't answer, but the number was Seattle. Dad? Carolyn's voice was tight with emotion. Robert called and told me what happened. I'm so sorry. I should have been there. You have your own life, honey. Your job, your friends. You don't need to drop everything for this. You're my father. Of course I do. She was quiet for a moment. Can I come visit? Maybe next month? I'd like to see the lake house. I should have come before. I'd like that. And Dad? I'm proud of you. Not everyone would have fought like you did. After we hung up, I sat in the darkness, listening to the night sounds, frogs singing in the shallows, the gentle lap of water against the dock, an owl hunting somewhere in the woods behind the house. I thought about Marcus and his belief that family entitled him to my resources. I thought about the judge's question, why couldn't they just rent a place? The answer, I realized, was never about money. It was about entitlement, about the belief that because we shared blood, he had a claim on what I'd built. But blood doesn't create obligation. Love does. Respect does. And those things had to be earned. 2 weeks later, Tom Bradshaw's article appeared in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. It was fair and thorough, detailing the guardianship attempt and the broader pattern of elder financial abuse. He'd interviewed Grace Murphy, who spoke about the increasing number of false APS reports filed by family members seeking leverage. He'd interviewed Robert about the legal vulnerabilities of older adults living alone, and he'd quoted me. I worked for 40 years to earn the right to live as I choose. No one gets to take that away just because they think they deserve it more than I do. The article got picked up by other outlets. I received letters from people sharing similar stories, children trying to force parents into nursing homes to access estates, relatives filing competency challenges over inheritance disputes, siblings fighting over property rights. I answered each letter personally, sharing what I'd learned. Document everything. Get legal help early. Don't assume family means well. Protect yourself before you need protection. Marcus never contacted me again. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he and Jennifer were struggling financially, that his business ventures kept failing. Part of me felt sympathy, but mostly, I felt relief that my boundaries had held. Carolyn visited in September, just as the leaves were starting to turn. We spent a week together fishing, hiking the trails around the lake, sitting on the dock and talking about Linda, about loss and healing and the different ways people rebuild their lives. "This place suits you, Dad," she said one evening as we watched the sunset. "Mom would have loved it. She would have. But she also would have told Marcus exactly where to go when he showed up with his luggage." Carolyn laughed. "She would have? Remember how she dealt with that door-to-door salesman who wouldn't leave? She just stood there in silence until he got uncomfortable and left. She was better at boundaries than I was." "I don't know about that. You held your ground when it mattered." The next morning, as I drove her to the airport, Carolyn turned to me. "Dad, I was thinking, what if I came and stayed for a few weeks next summer? Really stayed, not just visited. I could work remotely. We could fix up the dock together." "I'd like that," I said, and I would, because that's what family was supposed to be. People who added to your life instead of trying to subtract from it. People who respected your choices even when they didn't understand them. People who understood that love wasn't the same as ownership. I drove home along the county highway, past farms and forests and small towns with grain elevators and old movie theaters. Wisconsin in early autumn was beautiful golden fields, blue sky, the kind of day Linda would have wanted to photograph. When I got back to the lake house, everything was exactly as I'd left it. The dock, the trees, the water reflecting clouds, my home, my peace, my choice. I made coffee and sat on the porch, listening to the world wake up around me. A deer stepped out of the woods, saw me, and calmly returned to the shadows. The mergansers were back, paddling past with their chicks bigger now, almost ready to fend for themselves. I thought about Marcus's final words, "You're going to die alone." Maybe I would. But alone wasn't the same as lonely. Alone meant agency, autonomy, the freedom to live according to your own values. Lonely was what happened when you surrounded yourself with people who only wanted what you could give them. I'd take alone any day. The sun climbed higher, burning off the morning mist. Somewhere across the lake, I heard the sound of a boat motor starting, probably Harold Fisher going out for his morning fish. Life continuing, patterns repeating, the world turning regardless of human drama. My phone buzzed with a text from Robert. "Following up, everything quiet?" I texted back, "Everything's quiet. Everything's good." And it was. The house was mine, protected by trust and law, and the simple fact that I'd refused to give up what I'd rightfully earned. The lake was mine to watch and walk beside and draw strength from. The silence was mine to fill or leave empty as I chose. I'd spent 42 years building a life with Linda, 37 years building a career, 3 years building this new chapter in solitude. No one was going to take that away because they felt entitled to it. The surprise I'd prepared for Marcus, the trust, the documentation, the legal fortress around my autonomy wasn't revenge. It was self-preservation. It was saying no and meaning it. It was understanding that sometimes the people who claim to care about you are really just calculating what you're worth to them. I finished my coffee and walked down to the dock. The water was clear enough to see fish moving in the shallows, bluegill and sunfish, probably. The kind of simple observation that made life worthwhile. The kind of moment you couldn't buy or borrow or steal from someone else. This was what I'd worked for. This was what I'd earned, and no one was taking it away.